Hey, what's up, guys? Want to welcome you back to another episode of Street Theology. It is your boy Adrian here, and man, we got a full podcast today. Hey. The squad is out today, gang today out here. So, man, as always, Street Theology exists. Really, this is to take theology from a high level, bring it to a street level to our everyday lives, and it's all about launching innovative reconcilers. Again, we believe in a movement. We believe in the age to come. It's all about innovative reconcilers, people who are connected to God, who know how to connect others to God, connected to one another, the ministry of reconciliation, and this idea of connected to their meaningful work in the earth. And we believe that in the age that is to come, that is going to be the most important thing. What God is highlighting is that idea of launching innovative reconcilers, or what Scripture say, the priesthood of the believers, or however language you want to put on. We really seeing people launched out. And so that's our job here, and what we care about with Street Theology is actually helping equip you to have the things you need to answer from cultural things, theological things, but how do we do that and actually bring theology to the street? So today, I am joined, as always, over there. I love this shirt today. Hey. My man, if you're watching us on YouTube, matter of fact, everybody watching, again, we got our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. Again, you go there, check out our Street Theology on YouTube. But, man, you can see his shirt. If you go on YouTube, you see Pastor Derrick's shirt.
Rocking appropriate.
Rocking the Outcast shirt. I love it. Pastor Derrick, what's happening, man?
What's good, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. You doing good?
I'm doing really good.
Good. Why is that?
Because I'm actually working on this thing that we call life blueprint. I'm working on a purpose, process, plan, and I really feel like I'm really close to life's purpose. And so, awesome. Man, it's got me feeling super, super pumped today. I'm feeling good, man.
There you go. Yeah. Nice. And man, over here to my left, man. So my man's gonna give us a lot of knowledge, but we also could have a lot of all black people on this podcast for this
we
time.
Trying to fulfill quotas.
You know what I'm saying? Why
the man gotta be a quota though? How you feel about that, Trey? What's going on, man?
Reverse side.
Hey, I know why I was hired. It's all for appearances. Trying to be the diversity quota. But, listen, I've been fed the questions beforehand. I know what I'm supposed to say. Pastor Derrick, so let me ask you, looking at my list of questions right now, when's Andre 3000 coming out with that next album going off of that shirt?
Dude, for real. 3,000. We need 3,000 with an album. Yeah, we need 3,000 with an album. So, Trey, glad you're here today, man.
Appreciate
glad you're here. Again, someone who is always, she's consistent here on the pod. Michelle Warner. Michelle, what's happening?
Hi. I'm excited for this one.
This is going to be good. Well, today, guys, again, I want to encourage you, make sure on the Street Theology, man, leave us a review. That means a lot to us. We want to start building those up. So, man, go in, write a review. Let us know. We may even read some of the reviews. And remember, give us 5 stars. Again, if you got 1-star review of this, then just don't put it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Go give Joe Rogan 1 star. You know what I'm saying? You got plenty of followers. Don't give us a 1 star. But give us 5 stars. Let us know. Man, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to Street Theology. We're going to continue to keep giving you incredible content. We got some great stuff that's coming up in the future. Man. A lot of great people.
Really
My man
excited,
Tyler Burns is coming out, man. We got a lot of stuff that's going to be happening. So really, really excited about the future of what we're doing here. And so, man, today we're jumping in episode 41, the Dirt Nowitzki podcast.
Hey.
And you know what makes that great? On this podcast, Dirk Nowitzki, German. But if you ever know anything about Dirk Nowitzki is married to a black woman. Listen, I knew Dirk was about the culture when they show those pictures. Dirk would come to the game with a to-go plate. He literally would show up to the game with a plate with aluminum foil. I'm like, he married to a sister.
He did not.
He used to come to the game always with his little prepaid.
Wow.
With the foil on it. You know what I'm saying? He literally he just left a cookout and just went to the game. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I know Dirk was married to a sister when I saw that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But the Dirk Nowitzki podcast today, we're going to talk on this thought of this holiday of Juneteenth today. We're going to talk on Juneteenth. Again, it is in the news right now. We're going to get to it in a second, but it was actually passed by the Senate. I believe it has to go to the House now, but passed by the Senate to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Yeah. And so, so that's a big deal. So we're going to talk about it because, again, it's many times it is for some, even for me, it was later in my life that I actually heard about this idea of Juneteenth, but it is a holiday, especially within African-American community. It's been celebrated for years. And so I guess the first thing is this, man, for our listeners who don't know what Juneteenth is, Pastor Derrick, can you give us a little factual information on what Juneteenth is?
Yeah, sure. So short version is Emancipation Proclamation comes in January of 1863. and there's still slavery. So slaves are not necessarily free. Now, if you want to say, hey, well, it's not our fault. We didn't have social media. There's no Twitter, that kind of thing. We can't get it out as fast, or what do you want to say? But it wasn't until 1865. So we see 2.5 years later that the final slaves in Galveston, Texas were actually notified of the Emancipation Proclamation and were actually freed. If you want to go further back, it's like, what we're really talking about is 1776, you declare your independence, but there are people, in the country that are still in chattel slavery. So, I mean, depending on which one you want to go from, and so that was June 19th, and so that's why we celebrate Juneteenth,
So, like Pastor Adrian mentioned earlier, if you guys are like me, like I didn't learn about Juneteenth until probably about 4.5 years ago, and it was just something that wasn't taught in school. And it's not something that, like, even whenever I got to Florida State, I didn't hear about it in any classes that I took. I took, diversity counseling classes, all this kind of stuff, and it was never mentioned once. So, first off, I'm just curious, like, if you guys are anything like me, when did you guys find out about it? And then, two, learning about this, how did that affect you?
Okay. So I think I've talked about this before in some of the other podcasts, but I feel like I did not discover that I was Black for real until I went to college, and more specifically to FAMU. And I didn't know what Juneteenth was. Even I think I had heard about it at FAM.
Let me ask you this question real quick. When you say that because again, I'm really curious about this.
Yeah.
We say you didn't realize that you were Black until you went to school. What does that mean? For people who maybe haven't heard or whatever, what does that mean?
So for me, I wasn't raised culturally Black. I'm also half Hispanic. I wasn't raised culturally Hispanic either. I don't speak Spanish. We didn't do a lot of the traditional Hispanic things. What I learned and gathered about Black history was very much whatever was taught in school. Okay. Didn't really hear a lot of even my dad's stories or my parents' stories and struggles until recently when I started asking questions like, yo, why did you never teach us about this? Why are we never prepared for this? And I mean, my dad, I feel like, was really pure in heart and like, well, we wanted to protect you from that as much as we could, because we knew that life would teach it to you eventually, and we would have the conversations eventually. But I didn't want to have to overexpose you ahead of the time that you'd be able to understand it.
Gotcha.
So I think that was part of his reasoning, but at FAMU was very much the first time that I saw that you could be Black and professional and have the afro, the natural hair, like you can, I mean, just everything. And so I had heard about it a little bit at FAMU, and then 3 years ago is when I heard about it, actually from a friend who used to be here, Portia, was the first person who told me about it. She had a little Juneteenth gathering at her house, and she was like, what are you doing for Juneteenth? I was like, June 19th? Like, why are you merging the words together? And she had to explain it to me. We went to her house for the little shindig, and then last year is definitely when I started learning more about it, just in the wake of everything that happened in 2020. And so I think slowly it's starting to mean more and more, and just understanding the depth of what it means to actually celebrate freedom. So it's definitely been a journey, still learning more about it, but yeah,
this one is interesting. I went to a historically Black college in Tennessee State University, and I have no memory even there of talking about it or whatever. I'm probably I am in my 40s, man, so it probably wasn't until I was 30 that I actually heard of it, and just never thought much of it until, like you said, until all this stuff started to happen. It was just to me, it was just a factual date. It was like, oh, now I know when this actually happened. Got it. Oh, well, it's kind of messed up. 2.5 years later, man, it's kind of messed up. But, no connection until, like I said, all of the other tensions and things started to heighten probably in 2015 with Trayvon Martin. And so yeah, man, it's crazy how that could happen, man.
Yeah, for me, it was, again, that's what's crazy is I'm a history minor. And, I'm a history minor. Parents grew up in the South and, a lot of stuff. But, man, this was something that really wasn't communicated. It wasn't something I learned to, honestly, until about 10 years ago. Starting low, and then I know it's become more and more out there. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of people, again, in one of the spaces, the things I work in, there's a lot of CEOs I've talked to, like, man, last year they were like, oh, I didn't know that this was actually a thing and all that. And then they got to know, like, oh, and, even historically, they're like, wow, man, that this did happen. Even like the historical part of not just as a holiday, but like it was 2 years later of all that. And they're like, man, I can't believe that would happen. And these are people who are, welcoming, but it's like it's just stuff that's not taught, kind of, from a historical standpoint. So I think it's really, important to kind of ask those questions because, and then when you hear about it, 'cause a lot of people, man, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that. So it's just kind of normal. So
yeah, that's really good. And obviously, we're talking a lot about just in factual, like when did we become aware of it? When did we have knowledge of it? But also, what were the emotions and the feelings that are tied to it? I know we talk a lot about holding tension here, but it's like part of this holiday is so much of a celebration, but at the same time, there's that tension and grief of, okay, but we still have so far to go. How do you manage the tension when you celebrate Juneteenth? What does that look like for you guys?
I'll go ahead.
Go for it. No, I was gonna say some of the tension, but being honest, man, some of the tension is even around the idea of like, okay, so now do I still celebrate July 4th?
Right.
Like I remember Lecrae got, he caught a lot of backlash from just, simply saying things like, hey, I don't really get down with this anymore because it doesn't mean what it means to you. We're living in two different worlds. And so part of the tension is like, well, what do I do? I live, my wife is white, my children are biracial, they're mixed, so it's like,
yeah,
that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, coming from my experience growing up, of July 4th was always a celebration. There was fireworks. We would go to the beach. There's things like that. But it was never around this idea of, like, we got freedom from taxation. Like,
well, we living it now, boy.
Hey,
we living it up.
I want to know my congressman, like, let me know. So, like, I want to be able to write a letter in, all that. Like, none of that hit me until later, but, on a real level, like.
That is seriously that needs to be clipped out right there. That was awesome.
It kind of hit me. It's like, okay, my experience in thinking about what we have based this culture on, like white culture, right? I mean, thinking about this is what America's been built off of from the start. And thinking, okay, well, we're going to talk about we have freedom. You get like the Braveheart, Mel Gibson, freedom. We got all this going on. And then it's like, yeah, but Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom from slavery. And think about the time gap. And so for me, it hit me as like somewhat, it was a dawning realization and mixed with like grieving and empathy of, I don't understand this. And I need to figure out how I can get to a point to where I can like come alongside, because this is something I need to learn more about if I'm going to exist and be an innovative reconciler in a diverse community,
Yeah. No, that's really good, and I think it's because of this. Going kind of piggyback off of Trey, there's a part of me where there's like, man, I am where two things can be equally true. I celebrate the fact we'll get to it, of it being a national, potentially being a national holiday and it's being highlighted. I celebrate that, and I sit in that moment and celebrate. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like, well, it's about being a guy, which I'm really not. Like, hey, it's about time. We should have. I'm like, because I think people are going to do that, and I think that's not helpful. But also, it's but on that one side, so it's a celebrate. I'm like, okay, this is how I feel. I'm happy it's becoming a thing now. It's also an anger, because here's the truth about it is because when I listen to people talk, it's kind of what Trey just said. It's like this idea that, when you talk about history, with freedom of taxation, what has been very clear in this country is Black history is not considered American history. It's not considered American history. And I remember I was reading that this week. Jamar Tisby did a great article on that, and his reason of why he thinks it should be a holiday is because what it's doing, it's validating in saying that no, Black history is American history, and there is and that is the thing where what makes me so frustrated sometimes is that to live to be Black in this country is to constantly live in a state of tension, to live like in this paradox. It's always there. And especially to live Black Christian, it is definitely that, because I know the calling is to be a minister of reconciliation. So I have to manage tension. So it's like you're managing tension just being an American, but then as a Christian, you're managing that tension. So for me, there's times where I'm like, yo, this is just exhausting. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want, like, there's times for me, honestly, like, man, there's anger, like the tension, like, yo, sometimes I want to be like, yo, hey, man, you got to balance, pick a side. No, well, sometimes the side that, no, I'm going to pick a side because this side's right. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, you don't.
Said the other day,
I'm sorry,
like, nah, sometimes, there's no balance. Like, one side is right, one side is wrong.
Yeah, like the fact that, like, listen, man, I don't care what you say, didn't have social media, whatever. 2 years, I mean, you know how quick we laid railroads in this country? And you could get a brother out to Texas, like, you know, hey, slaves are free. Like, come on, man. Like that. But that doesn't mean that, like, our country, you know, and then all you know, stop the steal gang. Like, you're out there like, well, you know, this country's great. If you don't like it, go somewhere. I'm like, no, I want this country to live to its ideals. That's what's so this idea of this tension where I love our country and I love this moment. So I'll say this. There's a part of me that's sad and excited, but then also there's a part of me, man, where like I would honestly tell you it's exhausting. There's another part of me that's like, man, it's hopeless because I look in the future, I'm like, God, like think about this. This happened in 1865. 1865. And now the fact that we just now make this a holiday and we want to pat ourselves on the back. I'm like, that doesn't speak to the fact that like Black history isn't American history. Like we have to, and this is the thing. If we don't start facing these realities, especially as Jesus follows and why we wanted to talk about on this podcast, let me tell you this for everyone listening. Young Black men and women are exiting the church or not coming to church in droves. They're going to be one of the most underreached people groups in our country. Why? It's because as Christians, we won't talk about this stuff. And we will lean into politics. You know what I'm saying? Again, I heard J.D. Greer. I'm going to pull that quote up so I can read it in a minute. But he made an incredible quote about the idea when you get into bed with politics. And it was amazing. But anyway, point being, I think we're kind of there. And I think it's just, it's kind of there. So
no, I totally feel that. Because, I mean, that's the reason I was like, oh, I've got the perfect shirt to wear today. It's just American flag with, like the value we place on Black lives, on Black bodies. And when we think about this tension between Independence Day and Juneteenth, it is maddening. It is very frustrating. So when you ask, like, how far we've come, it's just like, man, why does it take so long? Why does it just seem like we just keep getting like breadcrumbs and when it shouldn't be? So it's like having to deal with this. Being Black in America is always there's always this shock value. If you are self-aware, if you're connected to yourself, there's always just this like shock value that you have. This almost like juxtaposition of living here, where you're like, I'm valued, but I'm only valued for certain things. I can you know, I mean, because a lot of people are talking about that now. Like a lot of popular culture, you know, people used to call like appropriation, but there's so much of like popular culture, things that people love to do that comes from the Black community. We add all of this value, and it's constantly being taken or stolen, or hey, how do I? You know what I mean? It's just a weird time. It's just weird.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
It feels weird.
And I think I have a lot of feelings in my questions. I think that I ask a lot, and I think even just the tension of the 4th of July. My parents got married on that day, so for most of my life, I'm like, this is just my parents' anniversary. Like, it was hard to even just think of the 4th of July as a celebration of freedom, because it's like, I mean, are we actually free? Yeah. To what extent are we free? And even just things that people say in celebration of it, like, this is the land of the free, like, we built this. I'm like, no, you didn't build it. You built it off slave labor from someone else. You had other people who had already cultivated the land, and after they taught you how to do it, you ran them off somewhere else. And everybody, even with what you said, Pastor Adrian, with if you don't like this country, go somewhere else. It's like, that was the motivating factor of everybody who came here in the first place. Yeah. You didn't like your country, so you came here, and then you involuntarily took us from our land and then brought us here to establish it for you. Like, and now you're going to tell us to leave after you used us to establish it. Like, I don't know. Wow. I think that is awesome. the hard part, and like the tension for me is like, how are you going to tell us to leave after you brought us here against our will? And you volunteered to come here and didn't want to build it yourself.
And that's the thing, too. They're like, well, you know, if you like it, you can go back. Imagine living in Africa. I'm like, okay, let me tell you this. Take 30 million of the best and brightest minds off this place, and this place right here, and see what happens. Yeah. Like, come on, man. Like, listen. And again, and you talk about history and why this is important. Because even historically, we don't talk about the fact of how, like, you know, we talk, you know, with Tyler Burns podcast, the fact that, man, like, how we as Black people have been robbed in the story. Like, we're robbed in the story of not even being able to see, like, ourselves or being able to say, oh, man, it actually started in Africa. And you wonder why when Black people say it's a white man's religion, it's because history, it has robbed Black people from seeing. No. Matter of fact, you know, I heard Eric Mason say it before. No, when Black people say, oh, man, you're a white man's as religion, you're cooning. We're like, no.
Yeah.
When you don't do it, you're the one cooning because you don't realize you're robbing I tell young black men, you're robbing black people of something, a movement that has changed the world.
Yeah.
We were at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
We were a key part in a movement that's changed the world.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to tell people. This historical stuff and why making this a holiday and all this matters is because, man, it's validating black history.
Yeah.
And the fact that this doesn't show you how hard it is, like we have to go through all this to validate something where people who literally were oppressed got freedom finally. But we celebrate the 4th of July. And if we don't celebrate the 4th of July, now all of a sudden you question our fidelity and faithfulness to this country.
Right.
I'm like, it's crazy.
I mean, even that, looking at 4th of July, how much of a symbol the White House is involved in all of that, of the sovereignty of America, of America's power, of looking at the lawn. There's going to be fireworks at this time. It's like, yeah, slaves built that.
Wow.
And it's an integral part of black history because of that.
Yeah.
Because they forcibly built that.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, so let's show this. And it's almost in this way of like, if you know that, it's just further rubbing in the fact that this is a holiday for white emancipation, not equality of both.
Yeah, because again, like somebody said best, the center of this country, nobody wants to deal with this. We're living in this right now. The first center of this country is rebellion. Listen, when you actually, now again, some people are going to argue with me on this. Now, God's done amazing things. So please hear me when I say this. But please realize, when you actually study historically, when you go back and you begin to look at historically, like, were there crazy, like, could you make a case for the freedom to come over here for religion, right? Maybe. But at the end of the day, we break away. This is what happens in America.
Yeah.
But you go and you build it on this. This doesn't mean it's great, but this is what happens. You burst. That's what I tell people. America bursts things, and then we try to abort it. We birth things, and we try to abort it. You oppress people. You do all this stuff, and what happens? Oh well, let's just move on. No. You like this is the crazy you birth. J.D. Greer, I mean, again, I'm going to read this quote, and I'm like, if I was in the SBC 21, J.D. Greer would have got a run. Like, I would have shouted J.D. Greer down. I'm going to read this quote to you guys. Let me find it really quick. This quote from J.D. Greer says this: "The mission of the church in America is not to save American politically. When the church gets in bed with a political party, it gets pregnant."
Ooh.
Wow.
J.D. Greer, I don't even know if you don't listen to Street Theology, but I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this one, J.D. Greer. Yeah, you get Rick Ross on that one.
Wow.
But it's true. And here's what happens. And what we produce, we don't produce the body. We don't produce a healthy, thriving church. What we do is we produce this monster of Christian nationalism. And what we're trying to do now we're living in it. Now, listen, we're living in the wake of what you birth and what we want to do. But listen, again, Abraham. So it's the idea with Isaac Ishmael. Abraham got to have the promise. He still had to take care of Ishmael.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, man, we can't abort. You didn't abort Ishmael. Oh, I finally got Isaac. Okay, let's go ahead and try to abort. No. And you know what? You've been living in this tension. We've been living in this tension ever since then, Isaac and Ishmael. Point being, this is where we're at. The question becomes, how do we actually now take care of this and begin to form it in a different way?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at in American history. Sorry, I know it's a little bit.
No, that's good, man.
I think even just going back to kind of just with American history and Black history, in changing the narrative, I think one thing that would be really important is reminding and teaching both white and Black America that Black history does start in Africa. And you said that earlier, but I think even what it does, my friend and I were talking about this recently, what it does to the African American psyche to be told your history starts with slavery, instead of being told your history started in Africa, where you were creating and designing and having a take in science and art and architecture. Like, that totally changes your view on life and what you can achieve and what you believe that you can be a part of, versus you're always going to be part of the oppressed minority, instead of, no, this is what you came from in terms of art and science and excellence and all these things. And I think that's a really big shift that needs to happen in history.
I mean, because you're at that point, it's just continually letting white people define what Black history is. If you're like, hey, it started in slavery because that's when I designated that it starts for every Black person.
Yeah.
Versus saying, no, exactly what you just said. trace it back over here. I had an ancestor that was doing this. We were here. We were doing that. We moved from here.
Yeah.
We have this entire lineage that's completely lost.
Yeah, we don't know. That's what I'm saying. Listen, like right now, literally, Crawford ain't an African name. That is a white slave owner's name.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? And I tell people, like, you don't, and here's the thing, to all my people listening to this and who will listen to this, who, man, I don't, you know, questions from, like, what does that mean, you know, with Christianity? Like, please hear this. If you read your Bible, sin passes down generationally. You didn't own slaves. You're right. But you know what you also didn't do? You didn't commit the first sin. But we're affected by it. You didn't commit the first sin.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve. But you know what, though? Are we affected by the sin of our parents? 100% we are.
Right.
So it's absurd to read your Bible and to say, like, well, you know, we just all need to move forward. No. Listen, moving forward simply is this. You need to identify the problem. And honestly, listen, we're still fighting in America to determine there's still an issue in the church.
Wow.
Like, you understand, like, what are we talking about? Like that's my issue I have. Like, what are you, like, if you are out there, you're not even I'm just going to say this. If you think there ain't issues in our country coming to race that we still feel the effects of slavery, you're literally not an intellectually serious person to me. You're just not. I'm going to say it. You're not intellectually serious to me. If you don't think that, like, I mean, listen, it's just, and again, the same people who talk, well, you know, it's they push the emotionalism of the progressive left, which I get it. But let me tell you this too. Don't think the right ain't emotional. It makes you not read data. You know, this is just a push. No, it's right there. Listen, we're about to, I'm going to end here. We're highlighting a day that's happened over, you know, again, 1865, where black people say, oh man, y'all got some freedom. That we got to make it a national holiday where maybe black people across the country can get off. Please remember this. We were fighting when I was growing up. Man, we might make Martin Luther King a national holiday. I'm like, what are we talking about, people? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I can go on and on.
Nah, man, here's what I want to throw out to everybody. So General Granger, he's the guy recorded this coming to Galveston, Texas. And he reads, you know, that they're free. Along with that, though, he essentially says, "Hey, you're free, but idleness will not be tolerated. So you need to immediately, you know, make some moves, get back to work. You know." So I'm wondering, what do we think that saying that, and for those particular slaves not being able to actually process that actually did for them, because it's like, hey, I'm free, but then like, okay, now I got to immediately pivot and shift to move to how I don't know what to do in this country. What am I supposed to do next? And I can't even process what I've just actually gone through. Yeah. What do you think that did to them? And does it remind us of things that maybe are said today in terms of the inability that we've had to process what black people have actually gone through?
I mean, one of the things that I think is super interesting that's kind of come out of this like merger of psychology and biology is this idea of like epigenetic studies. And what they've done is that they've looked very specifically at like people that have descended from plantations. So black people that had relatives that were slaves on plantations, and they've also looked at the children of like Auschwitz survivors. And what they found by getting down to like a cellular level is that you can say, here's a large area of trauma that happened that has been inherited. And so I think that first off, you're thinking like, okay, this idea that slavery doesn't have ramifications that carry down today is stupid, because you can take a blood test from somebody and you can see that stuff. Wow. Then two, if you think about, you turn on the news, and I heard a stat recently that was something like the average black man in America sees 4 unarmed black men killed in his state, just in his state, every year by police. And then thinking about looking at, you had laws that were passed just after this by General Granger, like the Vagrancy Act.
Yeah,
if you're not employed, you will be arrested.
Yeah.
What does that look like today? The modern industrial prison complex.
Like, incarceration. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
Michelle?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I think about with in terms of idleness would not be tolerated alongside of the other parts of the order that he read. The one part that he read that really blew me away was when he talked about, he said, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. And that was just so not true. There wasn't an equality between property. There wasn't an equal employment opportunity. There was none of that happened.
And automatically, you already know which one's employer and which one's laborer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You automatically know that.
Yeah.
Nah, that's great.
Well, here's what I tell people when you go back and you look at like how that would affect people. First of all, you know, we're learning more and more with the evolution, just like Trey was talking about. I mean, just even the idea of psychology, idea of emotional health, that wasn't a thing for most people, right? They were just trying to survive. I mean, and again, not only just black people, we're just in the frontier, all this stuff like that, right? So, yes, we've had some progress. So, like, dealing with trauma does impact you. Because trauma impacts you so much. I was listening to somebody we all know, Pastor Brett Fuller, out of Washington, D.C., and he was talking on the fact that he was reading a book, and it talks about the idea that, I think it was something like the book, and again, don't quote me, we'll put the book in the show notes, but the idea does like this, like the do dads matter or something like that, and it's not a Christian book, it's nothing like that, it's just the idea of like from a scientific standpoint, and he tells a story, and he's telling the story of the book of where they took these mice, and they put these mice inside this this test. And what they did was that they put them inside, and they would put this kind of smoke in there, and they would shock them. And when they would shock them, they would shock these mice, and they kind of did it, creating no response, right? Well, then here's what happened. Then, they go in there. They just didn't even shock them. They just put the smoke in there. And then not even shock them, the mice go crazy. Well, here's what happens. They take them out. They have them, mate with other, with other mice who were not like a part of this experiment. The mice were born. The babies were born. They put the babies inside there. They put the smoke inside, and the babies go crazy.
Wow.
And what they're ultimately saying is that trauma carries, right? Kind of what Trey's saying. It 100% carries. So here's the thing. What that did throughout history has carried. That trauma carries. That is why, and this will get to it, when you're wondering, if you're out there like, well, why does this impact my black brothers and sisters when they see somebody shot? Because it's something, it's in our souls. It's something that's been carried because it hits, because it's not just like, well, you didn't really know them. No, I did. Like, I can feel it. You can't explain it because it carries. Like, my father grew up where he literally looked and said, you can't eat here. Like, that carries in him. Like, that doesn't impact, that's not going to impact me. That's not going to be inside of me. It's crazy not to think that. And then going on, it's like, what does it mean? The fact of all of a sudden you tell people, going back to history, you're telling people, well, you have to, well, you know what, man, just go work. Okay, well, all you've ever known is to work land, so what are you going to do? That's why I always tell people, 40 acres and a mule happen, I think we're in a different place in our country. Because what you actually do is you give people ownership. You empower them. You give them equity. You start to do it, and then here, on top of that, you give them land from Confederates who fought against the Union to then give it back to them. That, again, South Carolina had black congressmen. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says it best way. He writes about it. He's like, the fear was not Negroes in government. It was actually good Negro government, because these guys actually led really well. And then they start saying, then there comes all the rules to be in government. You had to have this or own this, or you had to have all these different rules to actually be in government now. They put it in again. I tell people, you look at history, it's all these roadblocks. And again, for me, it makes me look at it and like, man, I have a sense of pride too, as a black man, to realize that the fact that black people still kept fighting. It makes me think about civil rights and the power of what they did, of like through all that, man, still loving, still caring, nonviolence, doing that. Like the power of that and what they went through. Like, it speaks to me, the survival. It speaks to me the fact of being a Christian in America as a black person. Out in here, I met a man, this is about 2 months ago. We were actually working with a client, and this man's 80 plus years old, African-American man, was a World War. I think he was a Vietnam vet. Was as a Jesus follower, loved Jesus in his 80s. And I saw him, I talked to him, and I told him, because whenever I see someone older who's black, who served Jesus, I say, hey, I want to say thank you for still loving Jesus, because I know that was not easy. Now, again, that's the walk of Jesus is hard for any human.
Right.
But you add something on it. That's adding a weight vest on it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I say, hey, thank you. And he wasn't. I mean, he was excited. There wasn't bitterness. There wasn't whenever my man was like, man. He's like, no. But he was like fully. You know, he's like, he was fully like black. He wasn't trying to fit in. He was fully black, but yet still fully reconciled. And I'm like, yo, this is like, I know what that cost. Yeah. I know what that costs. I'm like, yo, that right there, that costs a lot. And so it's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I finally picked up the book. I've had it for quite some time. I started reading Permission to Be Black by A.D. Thomas, and this reminds me of that, because he's talking about what it means to be black and the black experience and this black card. And part of you holding this black card means that, one, if you've, especially some years ago, if you ever talked about being healthy and having these, having some kind of emotional resilience and self-awareness, you were automatically seen as this sellout. Because that's what quote unquote white people do. And when I think about the fact that, man, immediately they had to pivot to not trying to figure out what just happened to them. It's where black people get. It's one thing. It's a very proud thing that we can keep moving forward. But it's also where we get that idea of the that we've had in our communities for a while, the secrecy, the hiddenness, the like, hey, we just keep pushing through. Hey, we don't have to deal with that. Hey, we're strong. Hey, we're all this. And the truth is, there's so many people who are actually hurting because they haven't actually been able to process the trauma that we keep talking about that actually lives inside the body now. It's incredibly makes you proud, but it's also incredibly sad that we believe that somehow we're just strong enough, and we could pray it away. This hit. I mean, we're in street theology. I mean, there's stuff like, man, this can't just spiritualize this and just pray this prayer and move on. There has to be deep work that's done. And so that's why I love doing the Nehemiah Institute. Love Trey going through and working through this idea of self-awareness, because a lot of times you just like, hey man, you just feel like you gotta keep moving on. So I can't imagine what that was like for them not to be able to process. I almost feel like, yo, this idea biblically of this like year of Jubilee, like, yo, I'd rather need a year of Jubilee around this month. You know what I mean?
Listen, yo,
where everything, you know what I'm saying?
Like, let me
straight year of black celebration.
You know what I'm saying?
No, listen, and this is really important. I tell people all the time, and like some people think, wait, what's going on? Like, 100%. Like for me personally, everyone fights. Every person fights. Like, not know if they're good enough, whatever, right? Man. I constantly have to, and I'm realizing my father did this. My father used to always look at me, and he used to always tell me, I didn't get it until I got older. My father would look at me and would just always tell me, he was like, hey, as a black man, he was like, listen, he would look at me, he was like, yo, you're going to go through a lot, but you're strong. He's like, you're good. You know what I'm saying? There's something unique about it. He would say things like that to me. And I realized how much, how much you get questioned. And you talk about the year of Jubilee, like, man, celebrating that. Like, I got to a point now, some people may think it's arrogance, but let me tell you this. You know what? At the end of the day, no. I'm going to celebrate the fact that, man, as a black man who deeply loves Jesus, been faithfully married to my wife coming up on 20 years, 3 kids, all this stuff, yo, this ain't normal. And I'm super thankful for it, and I'm going to celebrate that, and I'm proud of that. And I know it's by the grace of God, but I'm going to celebrate that because you know why? For so long, we couldn't. And you have to do this. So you talk about year of Jubilee. I want to encourage you. I think it's for every human. They should, like, man, sometimes we are always, me, I'm the glass half empty. But sometimes you got to celebrate, we come a long way, like, personally. And I think celebrating that. And I think for, like, if you're, a person of color, if you're black on the list to this pod, man, it's okay. Sometimes you just got to take a step back and be like, no, we good. Like, yo, I'm good. You got a place to go, but it's okay. And you talk about year of Jubilee, sometimes you got to celebrate it. It's okay to do that. I had one dude I saw is hilarious. One guy, man, he literally celebrates. Every month, he celebrates being, like, yo, he's like, me being alive because he comes to this crazy thing, is an amazing thing. So my man literally throws himself, like my man like parties, get out like 2 or 3 days every month. Every month. He like, no, we ain't got no one day. That's amazing. And I was like, you think like, yo, man, that's kind of that's the most like Gen Z millennial thing ever. But then when I think about it, I'm like, that brother owns something. You know what I'm saying? That brother's owning something. So anyway,
yeah. I don't know what it's. I know we're trying to move on. Even when you said that, the idea of being. There's what you guys have to realize is that like the idea of being fully black and embracing that somehow you have to square that with the thought that there are people who will actually look at that and then believe just because you are celebrating your blackness, just because you are embracing that somehow now you are more dangerous. You are more like you are, or you're unfaithful to the gospel. Like always, like why is it that my own like pride and my people and my skin can somehow be equated with now that like now I'm something different. Now I'm like some like militant now, or now I don't get it. It's just funny and weird. Like
the crazy thing to that, like hearing you say that, because I'm studying a lot right now on purpose and purpose development, specifically in Black youth, and how positive racial self-identity contributes drastically to purpose development in Black youth. And so for me to be Black or to be Hispanic and to be proud of that also allows me to live a more purpose-driven life. And so my sub-theory when you say that is that people are afraid of purpose-driven Black Americans.
Wow. Yeah, because there's that, you're right, because what happened, and I think it goes back to people are afraid of, we talk about, and that's a great point. I think purpose-driven, like, people are afraid of purpose-driven humans, but especially purpose-driven Black people in the country, because now it's like when you begin to understand what you're doing, like, yo, I don't need your validation. I don't need any of it. And that's why I think this whole thing, even coming up, our New Rules Conference, potentially the title being New Tables, because, like, yo, what you're seeing in our world today and all this stuff, like, people don't need that approval.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. And let me just say this point, and we can move on. I know Trey has a question. It's like, or I actually have a question for you guys, but I want to say this. To embrace being who you are does not mean I can say, man, I am a Black man. Now, I know my identity now is in Jesus, first and foremost. So I can say that. And also in the same breath say, I'm a Black man, and I'm proud to be a Black man.
Yeah.
Because why? God made me that way.
Yes.
God made me that way. So honestly, for me to fully understand who I am in Christ, I have to understand I'm a Black man because he made me that way. So that does not mean I elevate. The thing that people have to understand, if you actually would slow down and not listen to talking heads or whatever backwards SBC person you listen to is this, and I don't care if you're there. Like, listen, listen. That's a whole other conversation for another day. But it's the point, though. But whoever you listen to, and sitting here having this conversation about, well, you're in Christ, God doesn't see color, doesn't see race, all this stuff, which is idiotic. But what I can honestly say is that, like, no, me saying I'm Black man, I can celebrate that. Now, if I take things of my culture and I elevate that does not line up to Scripture, that's out of context.
Right.
That's wrong. Right. Just like anything. But to say that, no, I celebrate things that are uniquely to Black culture, and I'm super thankful for and highlight that and talk about that, no, that's an amazing thing. And I think, and it doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make me, oh, you're not trying to build this way. No, it just makes me have to say, no, this is something I highlight, because you know what? Coming up in a white evangelical world, I suppressed so much of that stuff. I thought a lot of my culture was bad. I thought a lot of my culture was bad. I thought going and watching people step at, on the set at FAMU and things like that. Oh man, I had people, and again, well-meaning, well, hey, that's a little bit, that's a little bit whatever, derogatory. I don't know if they can do that, But these same people, then, you listen to like 80s and, 80s rock music, going to concerts, doing stuff like that. And yet and still you say that's okay, but this isn't. Because many times we ascribe things that we said were the gospel to white culture.
Right.
And it wasn't. Wow. It's white culture.
I mean, and it just shows how much white evangelicals don't understand the Bible whenever you go back and realize, like, okay, the whole purpose of Juneteenth is celebrating the end of slavery. Didn't the Jews do the same thing?
Right.
Every year? On top of that. And then going into, is it okay to celebrate black culture? Is it okay to celebrate your blackness? Well, didn't the Jews do that like 7 times a year?
Right.
So why isn't it okay to continue? You know, it's like there's nothing that makes me more furious than thinking about like, okay, hey, well, why we're going to have a Black History Month. Why don't we have a White History Month? It's like, because you guys were the ones that took that from them. Right. So you have to give it back. It's like,
like white entertainment TV. It's called ABC, NBC, and CBS. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? Listen, you don't believe me? You don't believe me? Let me tell you this. You know why? Because what do we all say? Listen, if it was all equal, you know what happened? When the Cosby Show came out in different world, boy, black people was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. It was on a major network, and you saw a healthy family.
Yeah.
You saw a healthy family.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. You know what I'm saying? I tell people, man, like, we could go on and on, but
I just can't help but wonder, like, is it if you're the dominant culture, I can't help but wonder if it's like, is it the, hey, if you go and build this, I'm not a part of that. I can't be a part of that, and there's just innateness, like I'm supposed to be. So it's like just fear. Is it like fear driven? Because it's like I know not, and it's not. This is not a bad thing. It's just like if you're a dominant culture, you don't know anything. Your stuff is the dominant stuff. That's. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just wondering if
because it's like using we use it when we do our DEI work. One of the questions I get asked, I give people an opportunity, they ask me whatever they want. One of the questions, well, why can't black people say the N-word? And here's the point. You know what? Let me tell you this. If I heard Todd, it was Todd House coach said it, and it was great. It was in an interview. They're like, well, people ask you why, and he's like, well, let me tell you this. If my wife and her friends are around each other, and they call each other the B word, you think I'm participating in that? No, right? The point is this: for the first time. Many times because there's not a thing that white people have access to. Now we're saying, no, you don't get to have this. And now that makes people feel some type of way. It makes you feel some type of way, and you don't even realize you're doing it. You don't get access to it. No, you don't get access to say this. Sorry, no, these are things that are this. Just like for a long time. And that's not reverse racism. Right. That's not reverse racism. That's a freaking intellectually lazy argument. It's not reverse racism. Right. What we're ultimately trying to say is this. There are things because, why can't you say the N-word? Because the word was created, and that word was created to be a derogatory thing. And black people with black people magic turned it and said, hey, and some people don't like it. Some black people, I don't think they use the word. That's fine. That's up to you. But for me, it's like, no, they turned this. And again, we knew growing up, you know what? That word had a lot of meanings. You know what I'm saying? And that word had a lot of meanings. It could be a greeting. I mean, it could be a greeting. It could explain something. I mean, it could be like, it could be like a fight about to break out. Again, your inflection or how you say that word to somebody. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're like, yo, what's up? And then, oh, well, we good. You know what I'm saying? And then the same word, what's up, my, it's a fight. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but the point is I say that is that you don't get to do that. And that's okay. That's okay. Just like, there's certain parts of like wealthy culture I don't get to experience. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what it's like to, kind of be like to be on a yacht and eat caviar. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, well, maybe a bad analogy, but I don't know what that's like. I don't get to touch that or whatever. So I just think it's just something, to be able to do that. So here's one thing I want to do, because I know we've been going a little bit long. I want to ask this question really quick. I do want to ask this question. And there's two. Do we think it should be really quick? Because I want Trey to ask this last one. Do we think it should be a national holiday? Yes.
Yeah, without a doubt.
One word answer. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Last question.
So last thing, wrapping up really quick. We've been talking about this a lot. We've been talking about black culture. So is it the same if a black person chooses not to celebrate the 4th of July, and as it is if a white person chooses not to celebrate Juneteenth? So that's part one. And then part two would be like, as innovative reconcilers, how do we help like hold that tension and like facilitate these conversations?
I think my first thought, y'all can correct me, is technically 4th of July did not include celebration of black people. So as a black person, I don't feel inclined to celebrate it, and I don't think it's wrong to not celebrate a holiday that was not intended or inclusive of me to begin with. That being said, Juneteenth, I do think, is specifically designed to celebrate black freedom. If a white person does not celebrate it or does not know how to partake in the holiday, I'm okay with that. If you oppose the holiday, I have a problem with that. If you want to learn how to celebrate, or you want to be a part, if you want to celebrate me celebrating it, fine. But I think my biggest issue would be if they oppose my celebration of my freedom.
I definitely like how you structured the argument. I guess I would argue that, you know, one did not include African Americans. The other one actually is a healthy, helpful thing for the entire country. Therefore, should be, like I said, should be a national holiday and something that should be celebrated by everybody because of the fact that this is all inclusive. Finally, we finally got to this point, and you know, can the nation, you know, celebrate and, you know, with this sigh of relief, like, man, we it was a long time, and we got this one right. Everybody, like that the whole quote, like, if there's people that aren't free, nobody's free. Like, is that really true? Do you actually believe that? Because if you did, then we'd all celebrate it.
To go off of Pastor Adrian's point from earlier, you know, like the way that it kind of sounds, and like what you're saying, Pastor Derrick, is that July 4th is a celebration of denial of access to an entire people group, whereas Juneteenth is literally the first step of reconciliation with both sides coming together.
That's really great.
And I thought that the way that you just phrased that was the first time that I had ever thought about that. So that's a new dawning realization to me. And just thinking about, like, you know, what does 4th of July mean to me? Not a lot. I don't like fireworks now because, you know, but the other side is that it's like, I think that it is kind of white people should have the impetus to be curious and compassionate and be like, this is a national holiday now. Who can I talk to learn more about this? And then how do I begin to start asking questions to show compassion for this? You know.
And before you go, can you please, Trey, go into, like, what's the difference between what you're saying, curiosity and compassion, to because what we're not saying is white guilt. We're not asking anybody to feel guilty. What's the difference?
You know, I would look at it as, like, first, going back, until more recently, I didn't even know what Juneteenth was. And I will say, like, the first thing that boiled up inside of me is just growing up in the South, this being part of what's been pushed down on me is, like, I did have white guilt and thinking about, you know, I just need to go and I need to kind of, like, prostrate myself and just apologize and make all these things. And it wasn't until, like, honestly being part of Engage and being in a diverse culture really for the first time and having conversations that I realized, like, no, what I actually need to do is be curious and ask questions. And then on top of that is, like, get answers. What I need to do is not to be consumed with the shame and the guilt that's, you know, does have the tendency to boil up because they're the enemies of the heart and they're always going to be there, but instead is to push out of you and realize, oh, this is an incredibly painful experience that somebody's telling me about. If I was going through this, how would I feel? And then can I give this to this person and say, wow, I feel your pain and I understand your experience and I'm really sorry, but I'm here and I'm with you now and let's move forward together and make this better.
Yeah, no, that's really good. You know, I think all three of you guys made incredible points. My simple thing is how you celebrate it. I think individuals have the individual choices to do it. I love how Michelle says, as long as you don't oppose someone else, but also just like you don't oppose anybody else. I mean, and just like you don't oppose somebody if they don't celebrate, 4th of July. I think it comes back to this though. Most of the times, the reason why we push things is because we don't. Again, we take bigger cultural moments, political moments, things that are being weaponized, because we have to be truthful. There are people who have taken, unfortunately, they have taken this idea of equity and freedom and justice and all these things, and they've weaponized this. They've weaponized this against, all white people, right? And so we realize that, and unfortunately, many times it's white people. Many times it's white people. It's white people weaponizing black people. That's why I tell people all the time, people on the far progressive left, I don't see you any different than I see the dudes who stormed the Capitol. I don't, because you were harmful for people who look like me. You were harmful for people. Wow. I don't see you any different. You aren't doing it because of all love and care. You're doing it out of guilt, and you're doing it out of your own sense of your own agenda, not what's best for people. So people with this far political left view, You know, and like I said, I'll say it, regular white, like very far left white liberals, like, listen, I don't see you any different than the January 6th gang. I don't at all, because you're harmful. But what I also will say, too, is you deal with the individual. So instead of, if you're not celebrating Juneteenth or even the 4th of July, like, it's okay. Hey, I'm going to want to celebrate the 4th of July because honestly, it's a holiday that honestly, just people weren't free. And the truth be told, maybe people, and again, give people room. I want to say this. Some people right now, they're not going to celebrate it because, you know what, for so long, we never stopped to critically think or even had the ability. We thought there was something wrong to say, no, I don't have to celebrate this. We didn't have the ability to do that. Now people are like, oh, that's okay. You know what happened? Let them make their own choices. Worry about yourself. Let them do that.
Yeah.
So if Lecrae don't want to like celebrate that 4th of July, that's Lecrae's business. It's a grown man. He can make whatever choice. Somebody can do that. Same way, but deal with the individual. You know what I mean? I think that part is like super important. So, well, guys, hey, here's what we do. Again, a lot of stuff, a lot of content. You know, we talk culture, we talk theology. Here's the point of why we do this. The way you actually, again, people talk about this idea of being ministers of reconciliation, right? The one thing about reconciliation, and it's something I'm really on right now, is this idea of, you know, again, the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. Many times we think of peace, and how we think of peace, it's just those who are calm, it's a certain temperament, it's those who do it. But many times, you know, you think about peace, Jesus was the Prince of Peace. Many times what they thought he did was create chaos. Many times you have to stir things up and be disruptive where there's already disorder, so actually order can come. And I want to encourage you guys, when we talk about this stuff, when we bring it up, it's honestly to have real dialogue, real conversation, for you to go do it, to do what? To ultimately to truly be ministers of reconciliation. Ministers of reconciliation is not denying the past. It's not denying stuff. It's actually dealing with it, facing it head on, recognizing it, but then still having the courage to still fight for one another. So I want to encourage you guys, these conversations, there's things you agree with, disagree with, that's okay. But I want to encourage you to go in, do deeper dives, to fight through, do what Trey said, be curious, be compassionate. Go take this, have these conversations with your friends who don't look like you, and wrestle with it. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you, on the end of it, just realize this: stay committed. No, I'm committed to you. We're gonna walk through this. Stay committed. That's it. At the end of the day, stay committed. As you stay committed, that's how we begin to live. That's how we begin to walk through this. That's how the early church did. Again, trust me, you don't really think that Jews and Gentiles and others from different didn't have conversation about race, didn't have discuss. I mean, trust me. Look at the disciples. They had issues with each other because of where they came from.
Right.
But you know what, though? They had to work through it. And they changed the world, but they stayed together. And so I think that part's really important because they all were moving to something. So, all right, guys, until next time, we'll be back with you soon on Street Theology.